All right, everyone, welcome back to the CASAA Advocacy Update podcast. I am Logan, here today with Alex Clark himself, the man, the myth, the legend. I just like to make him blush, everybody. Alex, how's your day going?
It's going all right.
That's it? It's just all right?
It's a Sunday, so slow and easy. The sun's out. It's nice.
Is it race day?
It is race day. They're in Las Vegas today.
Is this an exciting one, or is this like a...
it's Vegas, baby. This is fun. Okay.
Again, I don't know anything about... I don't know what tracks are exciting and what ones aren't.
This is the home track for the Busch brothers, Kyle Busch, Kurt Busch. I'm a Kyle Busch fan, so yeah, it should be a good day.
Well, I hope one of the Bushes wins for you.
Yeah.
I hope Kyle wins. I hope he goes in all of the circles. I hope he makes all the proper left-hand turns. I hope he goes very fast, and I hope he pits at the right time.
You nailed it.
That's perfect. I'm a NASCAR expert, bro. What can I say?
Exactly what we're all hoping for.
That's my sports commentary for everyone today.
Excellent work.
All right. Well, I guess we don't need to spend so much time on NASCAR. We can get right into all the fun things we're going to talk about today. So this is typically the part of the show where I kind of just give the floor right over to Alex because he's the man. Let's go over some legislation. Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of updates from last week. It was relatively quiet in terms of things being introduced. I'm starting to mix up. Well, I'm not starting to mix up my days and weeks. I've got them mixed up pretty thoroughly for a while now.
It always feels like such a double-edged sword when we have these quiet weeks. At least for me, I'm always like, whew, it feels like a time to breathe, but then you're like, no, it's absolutely not.
It's not. And the week ended, we'll get to it. I mean, the week ended with some really interesting news. But I will say, a couple of things that we cover in the update this week are some local alerts. Folks, we've been talking about this for years. So folks may notice that, we're not always going to have your city or town with some sort of campaign going. There are 39,000 local governments throughout the United States, and we do not have the funding to afford the service to track all of those. And even the big companies don't necessarily use these things because it's actually cheaper to just hire real humans to monitor this stuff. And so there's a lot of collaboration or coordination to get all this stuff nailed down. But we grab what we can through the news alerts. And so there's also
one of those things too, like CASAA has a good handle on tracking a lot of places around the country, but it's also really great when consumers themselves, members of CASAA, reach out and say, hey, in my local town or my county here, this just came up. I don't know if you guys are aware, because like you said, there's 39,000 local governments. Like, it's a lot to track. It's also really great when people are like, oh, hey, I don't know if you know this, but this bill just came up.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why, Kristen put so much work into building all of the 50 state Facebook groups, and why we have all the 50 state pages. But, mainly we have those social media channels that, if you're a member of those state groups and you see something happening in your town, drop us a note, and we'll try to amplify that, however we can. So,
yeah, it's absolutely helpful when everybody pitches in.
So, there actually seems to be a bit of a theme here with the local stuff. First up, we got hopefully I'm not Corte Madera.
I butchered it this morning when I talked about it.
What's that? You butchered the name?
Oh, I'm sure I did, because I said Corte Madera, and that's totally wrong. It's probably like Corte.
Yeah, it's probably Corte Madera or Corte Madera. Probably.
Corte Madera.
We're just all of our ignorance is on display here.
Oh yeah. This is. I'm sorry for my New Yorker interpretation of this.
I will tell you though, if there's one thing I excel at, it's being a failure in public. So put that on my headstone. Corte, Madera, California, Corte and Madera, they're looking to ban smoking in private residence with an exemption for medical cannabis. The ban also includes vaping. Of course, the question I think that everyone should be asking themselves is, first of all, what is the government? What is their business inside my home, telling me what I can and can't consume? Of course, your government, depending on where you live, has varying interpretations of that. But also, I mean, there's one glaring issue here: is how do people who consume medical cannabis have to let their neighbors know? Do their neighbors also have to let everyone else in the neighborhood know about the medications they're on? How do you make that distinction between medicinal cannabis use and recreational use just by smelling? And of course, who is actually going to enforce no vaping inside private residences? I will say I do understand that there is some transfer of, air transfer between units in an apartment building, depending on the building. I lived above a vape shop for a year when we first moved to Plattsburgh. I am not offended by this. I don't know why anybody would be offended by the smell of a vape shop that smells like fruit. Blueberry,
fruit, bakery, muffins.
Smell. Yeah. It's actually kind of nice. It's a little weird, of course, when you overthink it a little bit and you're just like, wait, this is vape stuff. It's not like a bakery. It's just, it kind of trips your brain up a little bit because, it's still kind of new for humans. But it's still, it's not horrible. But of course,
I would probably on the regular be like, oh, is someone bringing me blueberry muffins right now? And then ultimately be let down by the fact that there are no actual blueberry muffins.
It's horrible. We should protect people from that disappointment.
We should, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, if you live next door if you live in an apartment building or whatever with someone who likes to vape apple pie, and you happen to really like cinnamon and apple Yankee candles, well, ditch the candles because they're harming you, and stick with the person vaping below you who's not actually putting you at risk.
Absolutely.
Whatever, however you want to look at that, it's ridiculous.
It is. It's absolutely. And like you said, how do you just, I don't know I'm trying to fabricate my thought here because two key points that you made go together really well. Who's going to enforce this? Is this going to be landlords? Are they just going to intrusively come into your home when they smell medicinal cannabis? And then how do you make that distinction? Now, do you have to, publicly or to your landlord or whoever this is, discuss your medications? That's a huge privacy breach, I would imagine, to have to discuss that openly. And then who's going to make that distinction? Who's going to enforce this?
Yeah. So, this reading into the article on our site a little bit further, this is for housing complexes. And this is something that.
So is the maintenance guy going to kick down my door and make me show him?
I think part of this is relying on neighbors to rat each other out.
That old chestnut.
That doesn't create any tension or anything weird.
Right.
But it's, this is similar to things that we've seen in New York and other places. The law requiring landlords to have some sort of policy in place, designating a certain percentage of the building to non-smoking, allowing them to designate smoking areas and so on. And I will say again, I don't know that I've said this, I think, in one of our two previous podcasts. Having been someone that has had to clean out vehicles on a regular basis, I will say that, from a business owner standpoint, having your assets be devalued because people are smoking in them, and it doesn't matter if it's cannabis or tobacco, it's difficult to clean that out. And you're paying someone to do that. Of course, I worked for a small company, so our best cost saver was to just do it ourselves. So that I learned how to do that. It's not hard to do it yourself. You do have to pay for the materials, the chemicals, and so on, and take the proper precautions.
But it is an additional cost because
Right.
The people whoever owns the housing complex then has to pay, whether it's maintenance workers or another company to come in, and then the cost of all that material and the time for them to go through and clean all that out. It's an additional cost, and depending on how many apartments you have to do, how regularly, that cost can add up pretty quickly.
Yeah, so it's substantial, and I can understand, a property manager, building owner, whoever, prohibiting smoking of any kind for those reasons. But vaping doesn't leave the same kind of residue. It doesn't do the same kind of damage.
It certainly doesn't leave the smell.
Right. And even cannabis, I mean, depending on someone's pattern of use, which maybe we'll talk about later, that may not be such a huge deal either. So, but with cigarettes, typically, it's whatever. I mean, if you just smoke one a day, I don't think that's going to be that big of a deal.
Right. But if you're like I was, a pack plus smoker,
right.
I mean, getting it out of my clothes was near impossible for me. My clothes, fresh out of the laundry, would still have a hint of cigarette to them, And
I mean, it depends on the house, depends on the building. We're getting into all kinds of technical in the weeds stuff here, but I lived in a house that was relatively drafty for many years. I was a very heavy smoker, and after I stopped smoking in that apartment, people were actually a bit surprised that the place didn't smell like an ashtray. So again, it's a situational kind of thing.
For sure. All right. Sorry, Jim. We got a little sidetracked there. Sorry, Jim.
In the weeds.
But
so anyway, Madera. That's Corte Madera, California. Boulder County, Colorado, is also looking at a public vaping ban. This is, I assume, without even reading the article, just folding vaping into any existing smoking ban. So indoor and probably some outdoor restrictions as well. So that's Boulder County. Check out the link and check out Boulder County commissioners and see what they're up to for the meeting details. We got another private residence ban in
this one. Now we're back in California for this one.
Jurupa Valley. That sounds like a place in California. So I assume this is the same thing that we just spent 20 minutes talking about and won't go over again. But if you live in Jurupa Valley, be on the lookout for that and check our website to find the latest story on that. Just go to the blog. West Hollywood also having a private residence ban. And it looks like it's considering the ban. This would take effect in 2022 on March 1st. So a year from now, if it is enacted. And that's kind of it for the local stuff. Like I said, I just don't have state stuff to update on other than this is one I'm still trying to kind of figure it out here, but there is a hearing on Monday. I don't know if I have the time here. Okay, 6 p.m. Monday, March 8th. So once you listen to this, it will still be time. There is a bill in Rhode Island. It is H5548. And I just saw this morning when I was looking through our update. And I believe this would overturn the flavor ban in Rhode Island.
Okay, this is good legislation then.
This is potentially good. I'm a little apprehensive to be all excited about it because it's sponsored by 3 Democrats. So
there's a catch.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean,
that's my sorry for all my Democrat friends out there, but that was my gut feeling was like, okay, there's a catch.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's a catch. I mean, it's called the Rhode Island Vapor Products Regulatory and Licensure Act of 2021. So it's the state stepping in and setting some standards. And these standards involve everything from 1,000-foot distance for advertising, which, I mean, look, I don't think that anybody should be taking out a billboard to sell alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, firearms, whatever, next to an elementary school. Those kids are going to get all of that exposure on Instagram anyway.
And just the backseat of the school bus.
Yeah, exactly. Driving home, they're going to find it. So no need to really put it next to the school. Save your money. But I mean, this is, everybody needs to get permits and licenses. I'm trying to get to the exact wording here, but just reading through it earlier. One of the limits will be on what the e-liquid is called. So you can't use, candies, alternate spellings and variations of those words.
So they're going to regulate like the language used in the branding and the marketing.
Speech. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
this doesn't challenge any.
It could. It may
First
not.
Amendment rights here, anything like that.
We have to remember that the cigarette companies are held to a similar rule. They can no longer say light and low tar.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah,
that's why you have Marlboro Gold.
But that fell more into
they're all called now,
like health claims, right?
Yes, it does. And so the argument with the candy flavor stuff is that it sends the wrong message to kids. They think that this stuff is safe because it's a fruit flavor, or because it resembles the candy that they're given by mom and dad, or by
don't mind the nicotine warning that takes up a third of the bottle.
Yeah, like that doesn't make an impression. Because there's a warning on everything, and everything.
That's
guilty,
true.
So why
this coffee may
one
be
more
hot.
warning label going to make a difference? But yeah, so it's the label can't contain the terms candy, candies, candy with a K, candies with a K and EEZ at the end, bubble gum, cotton candy, gummy bear, cupcakes, cake, soda pop, lollipop, or milkshake, or variants in spelling of these terms. So, I mean, I can think of, I have actually had a flavor that was 3 different types of fruit. I can't remember them, and I swear I can't even remember the company. But it tasted just like bubble gum. I mean, there's a different way to describe bubble gum, certainly. And gummy bear, like, we don't actually need to call it gummy bear, I guess. I'm just trying to think of, like, here's the thought process, but like cupcake, cake, that's a pretty specific. I mean, not only is that a specific flavor in vaping, it's a category of flavors, like your cake and dessert.
Yeah, what are you left to call it? Just dessert. Like, are we not allowed to? Would dessert be acceptable? But that's even broader category. No one's going to know necessarily what they're buying. Vanilla dessert. That could be anything. I mean,
these are the things that are problematic and need to be solved. I don't want to say, this is a bad attempt or this is being done in bad faith. I think that, this is a legitimate concern, and even the industry, the vapor industry, has had these conversations. They may not realize it, but the conversations that we had about companies stealing IP and somebody selling like a Fruit Loops e-liquid. People have to understand that name, that brand was built up and is built up over years, and all of their marketing, right down to the font on the name, has been tested, and they have worked to optimize how they reach kids with that marketing. And so it is something that the industry really does need to grapple with. I think, VTA put out some standards about marketing. I don't know them chapter and verse, but, this was an attempt to kind of deal with that debate over what constitutes a product being marketed to kids. is it strictly limited to choosing the audience on whatever platform you're marketing on, or is it also what you call the liquid? I mean, if you put it in just if you just have a plain black and white label on there that says cupcake, is that marketing to kids?
Right. But, when you've got basically essentially Fruit Loops and the logo and this colorful, I've heard the argument about nostalgia about 1,000 times, which I think is, as an adult, I like Fruit Loops. I like bubble gum and I like all these amazing flavors. And sure, some of these cereals and stuff are nostalgic, right? Like that's the argument that I hear all the time. Nostalgia, and I'm an adult. I like my flavors. And I agree with both of those statements wholeheartedly. But like you talked about IP theft, like you talked about, like you're literally, if you're essentially stealing or utilizing marketing and branding that companies have dedicated decades to appealing to kids with, your product now looks like something that is obviously appealing to kids. Like all of that was market tested to do just that.
Yeah, and I will say, now I'm just kind of remembering reading of it. This bill does have language in it about IP theft,
which I think is great. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and through licensure and all of that, a company will have to, I assume, basically have the state kind of review their brands, much like you would do, at a trade show that is trying to enforce some standards about IP theft or whatever. So again, these are points that I think the industry really needs to grapple with from the consumer perspective. It's the conversation that you and I just had about how do I know what flavor I want to use, and the flavors are the product.
Yeah, they absolutely are.
It is important that we do have this variety because, I need to be able to tell somebody who wants to quit smoking and wants to try vaping I need to be able to tell them, just think about your favorite beverage and try that. Think about your favorite dessert.
Yeah, that's the exact same thing that I do with people. Like, what's your favorite thing? Do you really love, I don't know, strawberries? Do you like blueberry lemonade? What's your favorite thing? I bet there's a flavor for that.
Yeah.
And let's see if that works.
Yeah. I mean, you can just play that game, right? Like if you have a craving for a certain food, I mean, as long as it's, even if it is a savory dish, you can probably find an e-liquid that mimics that flavor. And it's, it's worth it for people. I mean,
on a personal note, that's what I did, and that's what worked for me. My favorite, I actually tweeted about this not too long ago, but my favorite thing ever in this, like, besides my children in this world, is lemonade. I'm such a sucker for like a tall, ice cold glass of like natural, sweet, tangy lemonade on a summer day. Like nothing will put a smile on my face like that. It's my favorite thing. And I used lemonade e-liquid to quit. That was my first go-to thought when I went to the vape shop and I looked at all these flavors. I was like, well, what's my favorite thing? Lemonade. And that's what helped me quit smoking. It was a strawberry lemonade, but a lemonade flavored e-liquid. And that's how you do it. That's what works.
Well, according to this bill, you would be able to find that lemonade e-liquid in a shop if this passes in Rhode Island, because lemonade is not on the list.
Good. Yes. So, I mean, that's still, I don't really like this list anyway, but
I mean, yeah, I feel bad for the folks that are trying to trying to identify a milkshake liquid, but lemonade not on this list. So, I mean, right
cream? There's cream's not on that list, right?
No.
So somebody could sell,
nor is custard. So
creamy strawberry cold drink.
I think this brings up, the big issue here. I guess, maybe someone could make the argument that well, no, milkshake doesn't really do it. But, when I think of like lollipop and soda pop and gummy bear and, just generally anything candy, well, first of all, kids are not the only market for candies. I know that's that.
True.
if it wasn't, then Hershey's chocolate wouldn't be as big as it is.
Yeah, and there are lollipops that are specifically catered to and shaped for an adult crowd.
Yeah, they are. So
I just wanted to make sure, like, again, you're right. Exactly. Candy in and of itself isn't just only specifically for children.
Right. And so, but, I think part of the issue here with some of these terms is that they are not referring specifically to fruits or necessarily desserts that adults would know to order. I'm grasping at straws here. I'm just trying to kind of, logic this out as to why these terms and not lemonade. I think, the bottom line here is that for something like this, there needs to be a very critical discussion. And I think, honestly, like, if we're talking about marketing standards, some of the stuff that's already in place makes the most sense. Don't publish your marketing in periodicals or on the internet on sites that are less than 85% of the viewership or readership is over the age of 21 or something like that. That's the federal standard. There were vapor companies that testified at a committee hearing in Congress several years ago who were able to walk into that meeting and hearing and say, we not only are we abiding by the federal standard, we're exceeding it with where we place our marketing materials. And I think they had a little bit of a misstep. I can't remember if it was Sports Illustrated or something where the demographic was much younger. I mean, we're not talking about teenagers, but they didn't quite have that. They were below that 85% threshold. Anyway,
but what you're saying is there is a legitimate right way to do this, and plenty of companies have shown that already.
I think there's a right way to negotiate the standards that are going to work for everyone. Mm-hmm. And I think what is in place, it's not perfect. There's always room for improvement. Yeah, I mean, here's the perfect scenario. We all acknowledge that none of this is ever going to be perfect.
Yeah, that's
where we need to start.
Perfect as a fairy tale,
And I know that the folks who are getting aggressive with vapor, that's also their perspective. It's just that they're more weighted to. It seems that they're more willing to accept the harm done to adults than they are willing to accept some of the things that they really have no control over as far as children.
Yeah.
So there's that's the imbalance that we're facing, and I think we'll get into that a little bit later. So yeah, as far as this bill in Rhode Island is concerned, I'm going to be looking over this some more this evening. This hearing was just announced Friday evening, before the weekend, and apparently, I'm not sure. I think there are a lot of people who didn't know that this was going to be called up for a hearing. So this is a last minute thing, just getting into it. We may or may not have some sort of a call to action for this. I'm not sure yet. I don't want to commit to anything because I haven't combed over the bill yet. But so this is H5548 in Rhode Island, and if you are interested, there are directions for how to submit written testimony. You can do that up until 3:00 on Monday, and everybody can tune in and watch the hearing. There's also information about how to speak. Maybe that's just something that was handed to me. I'm not sure. It's at the bottom of the agenda for the hearing. So it's the House Committee on Health and Human Services. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there are links for submitting written testimony and participating in verbal testimony. Requests for verbal testimony must be submitted via the link by 11 a.m. on Monday. So I know that this podcast is going up in the morning. If you catch this before 11 a.m. and you want to make some spoken comments on this particular bill, check out the link and find the directions. So more to come on this. We'll certainly be following a very interesting bill. and very interesting to see this in the New England states. And I hope this turns out to be what I think it might be, and I would love to see Massachusetts neighbors pushing back on Massachusetts' bad policy.
Yeah, I agree. And for everybody out there, I will make sure that the link to all of that going on in Rhode Island is right in the SoundCloud description. So when you're listening to this in the morning and you go, okay, where can I find this? Where can I get to that? It will be in the SoundCloud description at CASAA Media. So if you're listening to this on Apple right now, you're going to have to click elsewhere, but it will be there.
So briskly moving right along, I think the other thing, this is going to be a good segue into what I think we'll spend the rest of the podcast talking about, which is the letter from Cliff Douglas. But before that, I think it's, we were talking before we came on about this new study looking at youth lung injury risks and sort of comparing between products, between the THC cartridges, vaping nicotine products, and smoking cigarettes. The study found that the THC cartridges and smoking, or it's both THC cartridges or not at the same time, but THC cartridges compared to nicotine vapor, the THC cartridges were causing these lung issues. That's
their end conclusions here are that the THC cartridges, vaping of THC, has potentially more lifetime risk associated with it than cigarettes or e-cigarettes. That's my understanding from the article and from this study. But going into this, you and me looked at this. This is a paywalled study. And they give us very little information up front, really, to dissect this. So we're going to do our best with what we have, because paywalling science is always my favorite thing.
So, and I think the thing that we wanted to investigate here is the way that the conclusion is written. So it's just two sentences here. The study provides preliminary evidence that adolescents' cannabis use with ENDS, electronic nicotine delivery systems, may have negative health consequences. Lifetime cannabis use with ENDS was substantially associated with higher odds of respiratory symptoms. So when the average vapor reads this, I assume that they read it as that sort of a combination use or dual use of cannabis vapes and nicotine vapes.
Right. You read it, cannabis use with ENDS.
Right. But I think what they're trying to say here is vaping THC cartridges.
Right. My assumption here is that they just believe that every battery and vapor cartridge that exists on the planet is called an ENDS.
Correct.
And that it's the use of cannabis through that product that just is arbitrarily an ENDS is what they're referring to. I don't necessarily think they're talking about the dual use.
Right.
But I mean, we could just read through this. We could breeze through what's available to the public on this study really quick. The purpose, methods, results. You just did the conclusions. This is very brief. There's really not much to go off of here. So thank you, Journal of Adolescent Health. Purpose of this study was to explore the association between respiratory symptoms among U.S. adolescents who were current past 30-day users of cigarettes, e-cigarettes, and or cannabis, as well as lifetime users of cannabis with ENDS. See, this is where, so in the purpose, they do kind of separate e-cigarettes and lifetime users of cannabis with ENDS. And that's where I think we're on the right track here, with that they just don't necessarily know what they're talking about. But the methods, wave 4 from a national probability sample of adolescents, of 14,798 adolescents from 12 to 17 years old. using population assessment of tobacco and health study data was used for this study. Retention rate was 88.4%. The results, the odds of indicating quote unquote wheezing or whistling in the chest were roughly 2 times higher among those who had used cannabis in ends. Adjusted odds ratio 1.81, 95% confidence interval 1.47 to 2.22 for all of you science fans out there. Neither e-cigarettes nor cigarettes had a significant association with all 5 respiratory symptoms in the fully adjusted model. And then again, Alex read through the conclusions already. So with just this much information, my assumption is yes, everything that is just a lithium ion battery with a connection that you hook up an atomizer to is just arbitrarily defined as an ENDS in this study.
Yeah, and I highlight this. I mean, look, we neither of us can read the study, and even if I could, I couldn't tell you whether or not the research is of high quality. But I don't want to take a crap all over this study without reading it. But I think it's a good opportunity to kind of bring it back up that the folks who are researching these products, the folks who are proposing regulations over these products, the FDA has come a long way, but everybody else outside of the FDA seems to not fully understand the products. They don't understand the products. They don't understand the people who use the products. They don't understand the people who make the products. And it's very clear when we see language like this get confusing in research that I think there is just way too much campaigning, and it is fully skewed from the very beginning the way that science is approaching this issue. So that's that. I hope that is some form of constructive criticism for the author here and authors of other research to talk to a vapor and get to know the lingo, get to know the industry, get to know the products and the people. And I guarantee you that your research will benefit from it.
And I think we just need to define things better. And like you said, know the products. If people would just talk to people who use the products, if researchers would take in people who have, firsthand experience with these things, I feel like studies like this would be I feel like researchers in general would just be better off. Nothing about us without us, man.
Yeah.
But all right, and enough of our commentary on this.
Yeah, well, the next little bit is certainly going to be quite a bit of commentary. So I hope I don't run over any of our self-imposed time limits here. But I'll start by saying, Logan, did you read the letter from
I
Cliff
did
Douglas?
read the fantastic letter from Mr. Douglas. Yes, from Cliff. Yes.
And so your take is it's a fantastic letter, and
I think overall, it's a really good message. I think what Cliff is trying to say is a good message, because there is a divide that we need to come together on between antis and pros. I'm trying to find the letter right now, actually, to pull up while we go through it.
I'm sorry I put you on the spot. So
yeah,
I'll take over
I do this to you all the time, though, so it's it's perfectly fine that you did it to me.
Cool. Well, while you look
actually in our blog here though this week.
No, not yet. So I think this was posted on Wednesday or Thursday. I didn't actually see it until Friday, so yeah, this is a big deal. I'm happy to be corrected about that, I guess, or I guess I wouldn't be so happy if I'm wrong, but to me, this is a big deal. And just for a little bit of background, I first crossed paths with Cliff Douglas on Twitter, like in 2014 or 2015. And I believe he's from Michigan. Actually, that study that we were just talking about the effects on the lungs of, vape pens or cannabis versus nicotine products. The University of Michigan is where that study is from. I believe Cliff Douglas is also from the University of Michigan. He is from Michigan. And so he's one of these people who, is definitely in the tobacco control camp. At the time, he was working for the American Cancer Society, but his comments were more level-headed than anything that I had seen from, the anti-tobacco lobbying people. And so I continued to follow him and get very interested. I'm just always interested in what he has to say. I found him to be a more reasonable person, and I was right, apparently. And this is what it has come to. For those, we might get into this in the post that we'll be working on for this. But some people may remember Cliff Douglas being a part of the American Cancer Society's tone on e-cigarettes shifting a few years. This is when I think it was 2018, they updated their position statement on electronic cigarettes, and they somewhat softened the language. And
we talked about this last week with ACS.
Did we?
That softer tone.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not exactly sure we were just recently talking about this. So it's kind of fitting that now we have this. So anyway, just to cut to the chase, Cliff Douglas, formerly of American Cancer Society, has now come out opposing flavor bans. Basically, there's some call outs here on both sides of this debate. And I think he does a very good job of sort of threading the needle here and saying, look, there are issues that both sides have to work on in order for us to have a productive conversation about this going forward. So first of all, I don't want to I do. I want to talk about everything that's been on my mind for the past 24 hours about this, because it's a lot. And some of it I may be able to put into a post, and some of it I guess not. But some of
what's happening in Alex's brain is going to be exclusive to this here podcast.
So, the one thing that I sort of keyed off on here is that, he basically calls out issues with both sides. And I think, he in a much more delicate way than I'm about to, draws attention to the fact that the tobacco control movement as it is sort of disproportionately weights any theoretical benefit they can provide for children versus the harm we know will come to adults who continue to smoke and are not encouraged to use all of the options on the table, including smoke-free nicotine products. And so it's that disproportionate weighting that is going to end up causing net harm. And that's, I don't know if he said exactly that, but it is basically the theme here that a lot of these folks who sort of step outside of the tobacco control community and get to know the tobacco harm reduction people, they are now in a position where they sort of have to look back and speak back to that community in tobacco control and say, you guys are paying way too much attention to the young people. There are millions of adults out here who deserve the same kind of access and support that you're, taking away from them in the name of protecting kids. And there's a couple of points that he makes here when calling out the vaping community. And I believe he does use the words, it's the vaping advocacy community. So one of the things that we in the vaping community have pointed out repeatedly is what I just talked about, is that, the activism is disproportionately weighted in favor of protecting children kind of at all costs. And we're the folks, we're the cost. We're the ones that get to experience the cost because we lose access to these products that we've been using. And we lose access potentially to some of the newer nicotine products that are out there. And so it gets a little, I think, hyperbolized when we talk about it. It comes out as you only care about the kids and why are you trying to kill me? Kind of stuff like that. But it's really important for us to try to step into the shoes of the tobacco control movement, because the first thing that we have to do is acknowledge that they are real people just like us, and they have come up through this system where what they are currently doing, what they are currently advocating for in tobacco control, is what they've been trained to do. Yeah. And I hate to this is the same. Ultimately, this is a very similar conversation that we're having about police use of excessive force, police use of force, period. It is what law enforcement are trained to do. That's where they spend most of their time, is training how to judiciously use lethal force. And so when they find themselves in those situations, well, what they've been trained to do most of the time is use force. And that's what they're going to fall back on. That's what they instinctively do. So think about that scenario and now apply it to tobacco control or any other kind of, substance use control movement. They have been programmed throughout their years of training to destroy the tobacco companies at all costs. That is it. For them, it's about access. It is the ultimate way to crush access, is destroy the companies that are making the products. Make it as hard as possible for them to sell products. It is all about the children. It is, it's about sort of breeding out this dependence on tobacco, or even curiosity about it in their mind. And I think Cliff actually does some balancing of expectations here. When Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids says a tobacco-free future, what they're talking about is below 5% use prevalence. It's not actually zero. It's below 5%. And we have been getting closer and closer to that much. Recently, we've been getting there a lot faster because of the availability of vapor products and other alternatives. And which is, I think, I don't want to put words into Cliff's mouth, but I think that is part of what he is saying here as well, that these products are actually providing a benefit in terms of people quitting smoking. Anyway, all of that to say, that destroy tobacco companies, that's the training that these folks have come up with. It's not 100% of their training, but it is a large part of the mission. And so that sort of almost singular focus on destroying the business side, the supply side of this, is why a lot of these policies end up going awry, because they're not actually tailored to really help the folks that need the help and so on. Anyway, I've gotten completely off track here as far as what I started talking about here, which is how people in tobacco control who do really genuinely believe that they are on the right side of history, the ways in which the tobacco control movement has provided options for adults. And again, staying in the shoes of someone approaching this from the intervention side, the policy intervention, the pharmaceutical intervention side of things, thinking that is the best way to go about this. Yes, providing smoke-free nicotine products like nicotine gum, the nicotine patch, the lozenges. I don't know if you still can, but you could probably go to your local pharmacist and have them make nicotine candy, literally make you nicotine candy. You can get prescription nicotine lollipops. All of those things are available to people who smoke, and all of the marketing is there to let them know that those products are available and that they can help you. At every doctor visit, there is that moment of it's a touch point for public health to say, would you like help quitting smoking today? Here are some materials, here are access to research. You can go to the drugstore and blah, 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 all of this stuff. So yes, it is true that from that perspective, from the medicalization perspective, the tobacco control movement has made a substantial effort. I mean, even if you just want to look at this from the perspective of dollars, millions of dollars, potential billions of dollars have gone into research and development about nicotine replacement therapies. Millions of dollars, countless hours, tons of very smart people have worked on this issue for decades and trying to provide alternatives that will help people move away from cigarettes. All of that having been said, and I'm saying all of that just because it's true, and it is worth acknowledging it, especially when we're talking about bridging this divide. And so, having said all of that, I think everybody can, I think, acknowledge that and work that into our routine. Hopefully seeing things from that perspective maybe helps people temper their anger a little bit. The things that I go into next might not temper your anger, but it's certainly, I think, worthwhile to keep that in the forefront of your mind. And so that's that. That is in a nutshell, kind of, that's one of the things that Mr. Douglas points out, that the vaping community and harm reduction advocates, I think, need to sort of realign in terms of our messaging. And then there's some other points in here. I don't want to read the letter. I think everybody is entitled to have their own reaction to this. I had it on my notes, and now I don't know where my notes are. I got to write everything down, but then, okay. So, another kind of sticking point for Cliff in here is acknowledging the level of youth use. Specifically, he talks about youth experimentation, and I think maybe this is an area where we can correct the perception. I don't know, but. For the most part, all of the folks that the circle in vaping advocacy and THR advocacy that I run in, pretty much everyone that I deal with has been struggling for years to contextualize the numbers that we get on youth use. And this all started, before I even joined CASAA. So pre-2013, 2014, the vaping community has been talking about how this whole current user thing is totally miscommunicating use prevalence and patterns of use. And so we have been screaming for years, demanding that this be clarified and not used as some sort of bumper sticker propaganda slogan that just scares the willies out of everybody. If you walk into any situation and say 30% of young people are current users of a drug, everybody's going to be concerned. That's just the natural reaction to things.
Yeah, when you're talking about, almost a third of the, that's a huge, that's a concern.
So, and that is how this information has been presented. It's been, and so it's a warped way of looking at it. So, I always forget this guy's name, but he was with Public Health England, and it was part of the CNBC interview that got kind of cut out, but they made it into a web extra, probably because it contradicted their entire narrative of their story. But the gentleman whose name I always forget from Public Health England said in no uncertain terms that the UK was looking at very similar numbers compared to the United States. They just didn't call it the same thing. They're not looking at the kids who are experimenting with the product. They're looking at regular users, young people who are using these products regularly, habitually, whatever you want to call it. That number is actually remarkably low. And it's that number that we want people to focus on, not the 28% of young people who don't own a vapor product, don't intend to buy a vapor product, but they used it once in the past 30 days.
They used a Juul once 3 weeks ago at Mark's birthday party and then decided they didn't like it. But that teenager somehow is now in that percentage of quote unquote current users.
Right.
And that doesn't make much sense. Like when you contextualize that, most people, I would hope, would go, wait, that doesn't make much sense.
Right.
If I go bowling once, am I a bowler now? Am I like a professional No, I went bowling once. I didn't like it. I never did it again. You wouldn't consider me like a current bowler. No.
I don't know what's wrong with you that you don't like bowling, but
it was just the first thing. I don't mind bowling. Bowling's fine. the first thing. But you understand what I'm saying? Like that, it just doesn't make much sense. So when you contextualize that for people, they go, "Oh, well, why didn't they say that?" And that's the point we're trying to make.
Exactly. So, and I do know that there are some people out there who are using very blunt language in participating in this discussion and saying there's no youth epidemic, and but there are also people with tremendous backgrounds in tobacco control who have also come out and said that there is no youth epidemic. Yes, there is a rise in youth use, and it's fine to be concerned about this, but it's not fair to qualify that as or describe that as an epidemic. And I was there when the media relations director, I forget what her title is, explained or shared the FDA's new, I guess it's part of the Real Cost campaign that they were unleashing on children, and described that they focus grouped, with the kids. What's a word that's going to have the most impact with your peers? What's going to resonate with you and your peers the most? And it was the kids that picked epidemic. We're not making this up. This actually happened.
I've seen this was a literal screenshot from FDA. Like this is
exactly. So it's the timeline once again is very important here. It wasn't science that determined this was an epidemic of use. It was a focus group as part of a campaign to scare children away from using these products.
Yeah.
So that's, we can have that conversation about the concerning number of young people who are using these products. But I think, that's the context that we need to have this discussion in, not, oh my God, the building's on fire and we have to save all the children. That's not what we're looking at here. And I know that, look, I say that, and you're a parent, and you can call me out for, if I'm stepping out of line here. But, I say all of that understanding that to some people that may feel very dismissive. I don't want to do that. I fully acknowledge I don't have children. For me, this was pretty much a matter of choice. So I am not going to pretend to speak for moms and dads all over the country. But I was a teenager once, and I was a troublesome teenager. So I know what I put my parents through. I know how scary my substance use was for my parents. I have all of the empathy in the world for parents whose kids are coming home with nicotine or cannabis or cocaine or heroin or little airplane bottles of alcohol or some weird alcohol they got from the kid down the street. I know that is all very terrifying. And I think you deserve more resources and more truth about what's going on. And I think we talked about this last week, but the most, or maybe I can't remember when the hearing was in Alaska. But one of the star witnesses in Alaska was a mom who was asked to share a story about her daughter, and it was THC. Her daughter was vaping THC, ended up getting sick, and it was a huge deal. And the interesting thing was that, like, we all were listening to this story and sitting there thinking, this is THC, this is THC. And then finally she says it's THC. And then she goes into talking about how she had no idea what to look for. The only thing that she has heard about in the news and from the school and on social media was this thing called Juul. She didn't know what a THC cartridge looked like. She didn't know what an open system vapor product looks like. She doesn't know to look for any of these things. And so here are parents now who are actually being shielded a little bit from the truth, because the only information they're getting is intended to it's intended to persuade you to think a certain way about these products. It's not intended to inform you. And so parents and teachers and school administrators, all of these people are being left in the dark about what these products are, how they're used, and about the people who are using these products. So yes, I mean, I will absolutely meet any of these people halfway, and let's have a conversation about what the numbers actually say. I don't think that any of us have been given the benefit of hearing that in a truthful and honest way. So for the folks who are still out there saying there is no youth epidemic, I'm not in any position to tell anybody what to say, but I would offer the suggestion to maybe temper that language a little bit and bring it back to what we have all been talking about for years, is that, the words used to describe, the different strata of use needs to be realigned to more closely resemble reality. That's the conversation we all want to have. We are all concerned about young people using drugs, but let's have an open and honest conversation about it.
As a parent, first, I'm never going to tell another parent how to parent their children. If you're a parent out there listening, that's your job. You're the parent to your children. But as a parent, I want to know. I want to know the truth. I want to know what the real risks are. And for me and my kids are, they're not super young. They're 11 and 8. So they're still young, but they're not, toddlers anymore. They're kids that go to school and they learn about things in the back of the school bus, and they're going to be curious here in a few years about the world around them and things like this. But we have really real, open, honest conversations in this house, which I think is, I think that's where I accept that, I was the same way as a teenager. I did drugs, I drank, I skateboarded at 30 miles an hour down hills and almost got ran over by cars. I mean, I did a lot of really risky things, but nobody ever had those honest conversations with me about the potentials for harms and like what was, which I wish they had, because I definitely ended up in a few situations where I probably could have died. But in this house, for me and my kids, because I went through those things and because I know what I know and believe in what I believe in, I try to have those really open and honest conversations about whether it's smoking, whether we're talking about drug use. I haven't quite gotten into the world of sex yet, but at some point we'll have those discussions down the road too, and I'm going to treat it the same way. We're going to have open and honest conversations because I want my kids to make informed decisions. I accept that my children are not always going to make the best decisions because human beings are fallible at any age. But I want them to make informed decisions. I want them to understand to the best of their ability what these things are and where the risks are. And if they're going to choose to do something like this, how to be as safe as possible. Yeah. So as a parent, that's my approach. And again, I don't want to tell people how to parent your kids, but I just believe in having those open, honest conversations, because I think ultimately that's how we can try to make the best decisions.
Yeah, and I'm willing to wager that there are probably more parents out there with the same perspective than we might think. Certainly, people who are wrapped up in preserving traditions and so on may not like to hear that. But I think once parents are given, an appropriate level of resources, and
that's the issue, though. That's the issue. As a parent, if I didn't spend all this time researching and learning and, getting past the first 40 pages on Google when I type in vaping, if I didn't know all these things and take the time to learn them, I would just assume whatever the media has told me and take it as gospel and preach that to my children and move on. And that's just really disingenuous to everyone. It's disingenuous to me as a parent if I'm not being informed, like this mother in this hearing who didn't even know what to look for while she has a child that could potentially die from this thing. And the media and public health are pointing me in a completely opposite direction. That I take offense to that as a parent. Like these institutions are here to inform us so that way my children don't die. But if you're pointing me towards something that has nothing to do with the situation, you're not helping me at all. You're not informing me as a parent. You're not helping my kids. You're not helping anyone. That it's really disingenuous and it's really harmful. to not communicate those things.
Yeah. So, I think, as we're talking about this, I guess I'll remind, folks, like I very much appreciate this letter from Cliff Douglas, and I hope I'm not making it out to be bigger than it is. But I truly believe that, this I hope has a lot of influence over people in the tobacco control community. Cliff Douglas isn't someone who just popped on the scene a few years ago, had a job for a little bit at the ACS and then moved on. He has been in this for 33 years, as he explains in his letter. And Matt Myers was a mentor to him. So this is a situation where we have a person who is dyed-in-the-wool tobacco control, who is seeing a much different angle to this. And it's the why, that this is the part that I think makes me the most upset. And I'm curious what other people's thoughts are on this. But and just a note, please go read Cliff Douglas's letter. Don't just rest on my highlights here. And I do hope that this is adding things to the points that this is not criticism. This is, I hope really ultimately what this is providing are some pretty informed starter topics, I think, for everybody involved. Back to the impetus for his shift in how he views vaping specifically comes from his experience with a family member, his niece, who I think is in her 20s. Don't quote me on that, but young adult who was smoking cigarettes, but quit smoking by switching to Juul. And in the midst of the 2019 lung injury cases, she quit using Juul and switched back to smoking because she was afraid that the Juul would kill her. And, as Mr. Douglas explains, there was nothing, there still is nothing linking specifically Juul to the lung injury cases. And there continues to be nothing linking any other brand of nicotine vapor product to the lung injury cases. All we have are people who say, no, I used nicotine, not THC. That makes up the 16% of people who were, kind of not sure about what they were using. So again, no recalls were issued in the wake of any of this, and this is pretty squarely on the THC product. He saw somebody. He watched it happen. He watched what we have been saying would happen for 12 years now. 12 years. CASAA has been saying, if you ban flavored products, people will go back to smoking. And Cliff Douglas watched it happen 2019 going into 2020. And that has changed his mind. So my question to anyone listening to this, and especially anyone in tobacco control, I know the answer, I get it, but I have to ask anyway. Why is Cliff's experience more important than mine? Why is it that when I hear of people going back to smoking, when I hear of shop owners being accosted by their customers who run into their store and throw their vapor products at them and say, God damn you for poisoning me, why is that not significant enough to change people's minds? Why are thousands of stories like that, hundreds of thousands of stories like that, not enough? Why is Cliff Douglas's experience with this more important than mine? I'm absolutely furious about this. I'm never going to be okay with this. And this is not unique to vaping. I get that. And I understand that Cliff Douglas has a law degree. He spent 3 decades in tobacco control. That's why his voice carries more weight. That's why it's so important that Cliff Douglas and people like him publish letters like this now. There is absolutely no reason for people to hold back on this. If this resonates with you and you are in tobacco control, you need to post your op-ed now. This is happening. Thousands of people are being denied access to life-saving products because of the policies that the American Cancer Society, the American Lung Association, the American Heart Association, Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, the Truth Initiative, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the CDC, and people at the FDA have been pushing for years. Our blood is on your hands. If you don't want it to be that way, publish your own letter. That's it.
Yeah. Fuck. I'm going to edit that fuck out, but yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, I know that this is not unique to vaping, but, specific to this issue, we started a testimonials project in 2011 because of this, because we know that people's personal stories have power and they should. This is what we need. I mean, yes, we can have that conversation about making sure that all the ingredients going into vapor products are on the level and aren't going to cause an unnecessary amount of damage to people. We are having that conversation. The FDA now is taking pre-market tobacco applications. There are flaws in that process. We need to have that conversation as well. But the point is that, for years, people have been experiencing great success by switching to these products. It's verifiable for them. It's verifiable with their doctors. Their health has improved. All of the conditions that were being caused by smoking have reversed in so many of these people. We hear stories about people. I talked to a woman in Atlanta for a half an hour. She walked up and said, I have this really wonderful story. And I said, you need to sit down and write this into a letter right now, and I will send it to the appropriate person. She was on a list to get a heart transplant, and absolutely she would have died, literally would have died if she didn't quit smoking. Because if she didn't quit smoking, she wasn't going to get the new heart. And so she switched to vaping. And her doctors said, this is great. You can get the heart transplant now. Oh, the vaping is great. Like, is that not enough? Is that woman's testimony not enough to convince a bunch of people who are working in tobacco control that these products have, a utility and it's saving lives? So, yeah, I mean, we get to hear all of these wonderful stories, and it's super frustrating because, our job really is to help facilitate that flow of, these people's personal experiences and getting those in front of the lawmakers. But then to just year after year have all of that very real stuff, just like Cliff Douglas's niece going back to smoking, all of that just gets dismissed. You're just a bunch of anecdotes, or you're just a bunch of tobacco company shills. Enough of it. We're real people. It actually happens. And now that it's happened to one of your own, I hope you pay attention.
I still believe the plural of anecdote is data. And if you want to look at quote unquote anecdotes, just to plug CASAA again, I'm looking at the 13,701st testimonial that's on CASAA's site. That's almost 14,000 testimonials that are just on CASAA. Yeah. There are countless stories out there that aren't on the website because not everybody goes to CASAA.org and posts their testimony. But there are over 13,000 of them right there. Real people, human beings with families, friends, brothers, sisters, mothers, daughters, sons, right there that you can start scrolling through. 13,700 of them.
Yeah, and take that number. It's just like when you hear about power outages, right? The numbers they report about power outages are accounts. They're not people. Right. These are individual testimonials. It's not a full accounting of the number of people who are affected by this person making a positive change in their life. Exactly. So multiply that 13,701 by 2, 3, 4, and that's a little bit closer to reality.
Yeah. Damn, you said everything I wanted to say, and you said it so much better than I ever could. So I'm just going to leave it at that. The only other thing that I wanted to say, you were talking about that conversation, and I try not to to talk about it or plug it too much on this show, but the podcast that I previously did on my own prior to us doing this, there's a couple of episodes that people may be really interested in that realm as well. On the Rise and Vape podcast, I used to do spotlight episodes, and I did a few. I did one on COPD. I did one on asthma. I did one on drug recovery, and I also did one on diabetes. And in those episodes, I bring real people in to share their stories and share that success. So not only can you go to CASAA.org and you can read 13,701 of these, but you can also, if you wanted to, go listen to the episodes that I worked really hard on with over at Rise and Vape, and you can hear people share those stories about how these products improve their lives. I mean, people who would have most likely died had they not switched. And it's really powerful stuff. And if that doesn't change your mind or open your eyes or get you curious, like I hope for most people that it doesn't take their own niece going back to smoking. That's the thing that I want, is that it doesn't come to that we can help people, realize these things and come to these conclusions or see the truth, see the light, whatever you want to say, before it's something that becomes so personal. It's unfortunate that it comes to that all too often, though.
Yeah. I mean, people, it's human nature. I get it. We don't know there's a problem until it's in our backyard. It's like we have so many stories about this. Even, the most recent, or maybe identifiable for a lot of people, is, the drug war. It's a bit of a cynical but real, look at things, is that, the opioid crisis didn't turn into an opioid crisis until it started affecting white people in the suburbs.
It's very true. Yeah.
And so it's, it's white people in the suburbs who have the power and the money to get the lobbying effort going to push back on things. And other people smarter than me can talk, I think, more critically about this, but it's a pattern in our society. If vaping were something that was prevalent in communities of color, we wouldn't be having the same conversation. We know that. And so it's rich white suburban moms with their teenage all-star children who are experimenting with vapor products and may experience some sort of physical ailments or whatever, depending on their patterns of use, which is another thing people need to consider. At both sides of this need to consider patterns of use in terms of youth use. But it's those are the people that are going to get the attention. So, I get it. And we all need to learn to work with it. But hopefully this is all a start.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right, everybody. Reminders, really quick, the vape mail ban, that call to action is still very much going on. So please, if you haven't submitted your testimonies, you have until the 22nd of this month. Please try to get them in by the 21st, though. Don't wait till that last business day comes down to the last hour. Maybe something comes up and you don't get it in. Try to get it in by the 21st. It is a two-parter. It is up on CASAA.org, as well as a few places in California. Corte, Madera, some indoor private bands. Where was this? This was Jurupa Valley, Boulder County, Colorado, and there's a few other places here that we talked about today as well. I will have all the links and such as in the SoundCloud description for everybody, where you can go and check all of that out. And I guess that's it. I guess that's where we're wrapping it up this week. Fantastic show, Alex. We did a great job. You did a wonderful job. All right, everybody. I just sat here, man. I just sat here. It was so intense. You guys should have seen it. I wish that was live. Anyways, all right. Do you have any closing thoughts for everybody out there, Alex, before we get out of here today?
Just take care of each other. Be safer.
Fantastic. I feel the same way. Stay safe, everybody. Be excellent to each other, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye, everybody.